You're a Tar Heel, right?
Well, adopted.
Yeah.
I grew up in Pennsylvania, went to college there.
Penn State or
No, private college,
Okay.
Elizabethtown College, which is just downwind from 3 Mile Island.
That explains a lot.
Fortunately, I was well gone from there by the time that blew its stack. Or threatened to anyway. But I went to Carolina for grad school.
Oh, nice. So, there's at least one good basketball team in your repertoire.
Well, the Hillsdale men are doing pretty well here.
Yeah, they're doing
lately.
better and better. I heard young Kaltov is playing in Slovakia.
Yeah.
Wow.
Not to be confused with Slovenia.
Yes.
But,
very different countries,
Yeah, it's been I'm sure it's been an adjustment for him.
Yeah,
a lot more concrete,
Yeah. Well, some of the buildings still, the imprint of the Soviet domination are still there in some of the apartment buildings.
Have you ever been in that part of the world? I know you've traveled a lot.
I've been to Bratislava, which is the capital, and that's at the western extreme of it, of the country. I've never been where Peter is. But been to Czech Republic a couple times, but I think the Czech Republic has always been more developed.
Yeah. What's your impression of Eastern Europe?
There's plenty to like
there,
but the deeper into Eastern Europe you get, the more the imprint of the Soviet days, stands out. Yeah.
A lot more concrete, a lot of empty buildings, that sort of thing.
Yeah, just dull, kind of. But the Czech Republic is kind of, on the western edge of Eastern Europe, and consequently it's a little more, developed. They've always had kind of a leg up, and the Czechs historically have been a very enterprising people, smart.
So would you say from a tourist perspective, that would be the best Eastern European country you've been to?
Yeah.
Just from a sheer entertainment, tourism, not like...
and historic. And the other thing about the Czech Republic, what's, one half of the old country of Czechoslovakia, is that it was never really fought over during the Second World War. Prague was never bombed, for example.
Very lucky.
So, and it's a beautiful city, always has been, and still is. Warsaw is 90% rebuilt since the war, and it's passably attractive.
Not as ancient. Yeah.
It's just not.
At that point, modern architecture had fully, integrated, and it's just not as beautiful as it used to be.
True. But Bratislava, I don't think was. It might have been. The Soviets liberated it, and it's a very attractive city, and a lot of old palaces and whatnot. So, but it's an interesting part of the world, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a lack of a historical appreciation, but I feel like Eastern Europe is just one of those places that I don't have an interest in visiting, only because it feels like, as a Westerner, I would go there and feel really alienated, but not in the way of like I'm in an Asian country and the culture is different, but everything feels so, what's the word I'm looking for? Dominating, right? There's such a force on top of it. At least that's what I would assume, right? Which is obviously
it's been a hard place to find a good life. Let's put it that way. Certainly during the second half of the 20th century, until they threw the communist yoke off.
Yeah.
Now I can understand where you're coming from, but and I don't know everything I should know about those different countries, but
well, I would agree that I don't as well. So we're in the same boat there.
One of the things about Slovakia is it's one of the most beautiful.
Naturally,
and it's in the Tatras Mountains, are along the northern edge of it, kind of along the border between Slovakia and Poland. And people come from all over the world for like hiking vacations and whatnot, rock climbing, which isn't certainly not my thing. But so the Pope used to go hiking. John Paul II used to go hiking there.
Yeah.
And so they have some things going. For they're in the EU, they spend the euro. So Czechs don't even do that. The Czechs still have their own currency. But
I was just doing some currency work the other day because I work a little bit in sales. I was doing some currency work because we're trying to sell some stuff in Europe. And honestly, the euro existing, awesome. I love it. Just because it makes the whole process a lot easier.
Sure
just the sheer number of currencies you gotta, factor in and set prices for. It's just,
it sure does.
Yeah, not great. So I appreciate that Slovakia takes the euro. At the very least, I'll visit you guys for that reason.
There we go. Your money's good there.
Yes,
there you go. As it were.
Guys, welcome to the Monomaniacs podcast. I'm Dylan Strehle. This is Shadrach Strehle. And today we got our guest on, Dr. Tom Connor. Welcome. How are you doing, sir?
Thanks, guys. I'm doing just fine.
Good.
Yeah. For now, we'll see how the next hour
I was about
goes.
to say, I mean, at least you're going into it optimistically.
Yes.
With a smile.
Yeah. We're not here to ambush you, right?
Understood. No,
Wink,
I'm very happy.
Over there.
I'm very happy. This is a long deferred moment for me, so I'm very happy it's finally come.
Well, now that I have you here, we can litigate some things. I took Dr. Connor quite a few times in college, and I was talking with Sammy Roberts the other day, and
friend of the show.
And I don't know if I've told you this story, but one time we wrote papers. I think it was for 20th century Europe. I think we took 20th century Europe with you, and we wrote our papers. And I got a 93, and he got a 94. And he didn't let me hear the end of that for a month and a half. And part of me started to wonder if maybe you guys were colluding in some way.
No. One point is an inconsequential difference.
Tell that to Sammy
in my book. So yeah. So don't.
Well, one of us is in grad school at Albion right now, not Albion College, but he's teaching in England, and I'm here on this couch. So I don't know. Maybe that percent made a big difference.
Have you ever thought about that? I know this is kind of a out of left field question, but do you feel as though like grading, especially harshly, say on any particular paper, may have taken the wind academically out of somebody's sails to the point that they don't proceed?
Well, there are a lot of considerations that a faculty member has on his or her mind when grading. And you want to be consistent. That's the standard I tried hardest to adhere to, consistent from student to student. But the more subjective elements of grading do take that into account. You don't want to, sink somebody's ship, especially grading freshman papers. You don't want to hit the student so hard, say on a first assignment, that they can't come back or that they just conclude, because everybody's fragile to some degree, especially beginning college students, especially at a place like Hillsdale College. It's even more so now. I mean, I spent 37 years teaching, and I've been in the community more than 40 years now, and close to the college all that time. And it really is a different place. I mean, in terms of the students and what kind of performance you can expect out of them. When I first came in the early 80s, my judgment as a rank outsider coming from hot shot, North Carolina, one of the top ranked, certainly public universities in the country, but that, maybe up to a quarter of the students at Hillsdale, weren't really up to college work. I didn't flunk a quarter. I never flunked a quarter of a class, but they were the ones that, you at least tried to give an extra chance to.
Have you ever felt like you've had to be extremely disciplinary? Have there been extreme disciplinary actions? Like have you experienced something like along the lines? I mean, you've taught for a long time. Do you have any stories about, say, mass plagiarism or, people kind of colluding and stuff like that?
Either I was a fool and and couldn't catch plagiarists like I should have been able to. I mean, a very limited number, but or it just didn't happen.
Yeah. Well, you're lucky. You got out of the game right when AI started to be a problem.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, I've never looked back. On my decision to retire. It just seemed. I was 70. I like round numbers, and I just figured it was time.
Yeah.
But since that, I mean, I've been out 3 years, off the payroll 3 years. I still do things with the college, but my sense is that, well, and the pandemic happened in the meantime, which was no small thing.
Yeah.
And so I've told a lot of people one of the most profound emotions I felt when I retired was relief. So that I didn't have to make my own adjustments to the significant, changes that were occurring in anything from student temperament to student expectations to, fragility. I mean, I never felt like I had any serious problems with snowflakes, let's say. Mm-hmm. And I never really had major disciplinary problems either. I'm happy to say. I did have to turn some kids in, but
it's just a part of the job.
for plagiarism.
Yeah.
But I had a colleague in the history department. Poor fellow just died recently. Ted McAllister. He was only here for 2 years in the mid-90s. And he used to say, we were talking at a department meeting one day about plagiarizing. And he said, I figure, if anybody plagiarizes on me and I don't catch them, they'll be held accountable by a higher court. So maybe that's how I rationalize the fact that I didn't catch many. But it is with AI. It's even with the internet. It made it easier for students to try to plagiarize, but also easier for teachers to catch them.
Exactly.
So all you had to do was type in the suspicious passage, and if they'd plagiarized, it would pop up, as part of a larger work, and you'd have them nailed.
Well, Well, and something that people hadn't really, something that was a thing when I was in college was paying, and of course I never did this, but the outsourcing.
The fact that you had to clarify that makes me nervous.
Now the outsourcing economy got so bad that you could pay like some dude in India $15 to write you a 5-page paper. So I mean, there's always been fraught problems, tough to get over.
So go for it.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, I had a quick question because you mentioned earlier about, the change of Hillsdale students from your early days into before you retired or right before you retired. What was it like during the major transition that the college went through during the presidential shift, right?
From Roach to Arnn?
Yeah. Because I've heard a lot of hearsay in regards to it being a very extreme shift, like an overnight kind of a thing. How did it experience like on the ground?
No, you mean people have maintained that the caliber of student changed that radically that quickly?
Partially, yes. That's part of the mythology, I would say.
Yeah, no, I would say that's mythology.
Yeah.
I think the way we got through that, and Bob Blackstock was solid as a rock as acting president. He moved from provost into the acting presidency, and then did not stand as a candidate for the presidency. So, the national search progressed, and we got Larry Arnn, and that was the best thing that could have happened in that moment. And he's more than proven, the wisdom of that decision. 23. He just passed his 23rd anniversary of his inauguration. Saturday, just this past Saturday, the 9th of September. But Blackstock and I talked privately kind of throughout because we're neighbors out on the lake, and I had been the first dean of faculty and he was the first provost, so we worked very closely then, and we're used to talking about the most sensitive matters, always in confidence. But he said, all we have to do to get through the crisis when Roach imploded in the most, embarrassing scandal that one could have almost ever imagined.
Exactly.
Blackstock said, all we need to do is, teach the students, all they have to do is come to class. All we need to do is teach them. In other words, back to basics, or stick with basics. Why are we a college? What is a college? Yes, it's a partnership, many, many different constituencies, but bottom line, none of us would be here if we weren't either students or teachers looking to learn and gain an education. Mm-hmm. And truer words couldn't have been spoken. The swirl of bad publicity and speculation about what really happened with Dr. Roach and his daughter-in-law, and was the college even going to survive? All that swirl was pretty constant, but closer to home, people just did their jobs.
Yeah, yeah. Which is, I guess, how every crisis is made through.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly true, and certainly worked for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the one thing we were all particularly afraid of, some donors, I guess, walked away from us, but the money kept coming in, but we were concerned that students might not want to have anything to do with such a tainted college, such a notorious, infamous college all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And Jeff Lannis was the admissions director, and I had been admissions director myself for 3 years back in the 80s, and we used to joke when we kind of needed to get our numbers up that we'd run a special.
2 for 1.
And I think I can't speak for Jeff, and I hope nobody takes this as me impugning what he, because we were all in survival mode at the same time. We were all trying to do our jobs as normally as possible, but I think he might have run a special. That year just to keep the class filled, because there was a reporter for the Toledo Blade, a very energetic woman. She made herself a pain in the where, constantly trying to get people to talk to her. And I never talked to her, and most faculty didn't. We thought she was bucking for a Pulitzer prize, that she was really gonna
get to the bottom of things.
Get to the bottom of things as no one else had or could. But she was closely monitoring whatever data she could get her hands on about our admissions, our recruitment. But the class that came in the fall of 2000, which greeted President Arn, of course, because that was the first semester that was all his in terms of him being fully installed in the presidency, was a little subpar in both quality and quantity, but we started building up almost immediately. But it was I wouldn't call the change in the academic profile from, when I was admissions director in the mid-'80s, the average ACT was 21. Now it's what, 31 or 32?
Yeah, part of that's inflation, though.
They recentered or reconfigured, the ACT. But it was 67th percentile. Like if you had a 21 on your ACT, that was 67th percentile. So we used to say to the unsuspecting recruits that we were trying to get interested in coming here that, we recruit our student body from the top third of graduating seniors in high school.
Nice.
And but of course now it's like the top 12th. Almost
much more difficult to get in. I definitely would not have gotten in for as much money as I did or anything along those lines nowadays.
Well, they wouldn't have even taken a second look at me with my credentials coming out of high school, because I didn't do particularly well on standardized tests. I was top quarter to top fifth.
You play ball, anything like that?
No, no athletic talent was going to get me past a discerning admissions director. But I always did well. I had good grades. I always managed to get good grades. So that's what got me into college. But even that wouldn't have got me in here. So, but it's been a very incremental, I think, dare I say, carefully managed climb. And I think, with such a long memory, I mean, I'm really proud of what the college has accomplished.
Yeah, well, I mean, you were there for a lot of it too.
Well, I was just sort of along for the ride, but looking back on it, I made a lot of friends here, student friends, and a lot of those folks wouldn't have made it into the college today.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, were leaders, whether in fraternity or student government or whatever. And realizing that the standards are so high here now that, a lot of those people would have never gotten in, and I never would have gotten to know them.
Yeah.
I realized how much the poorer I would be for that. You kind of think of, well, what we're missing, what we're maybe losing as we continue to climb. But there's, it's a hard argument to make against being as good as you can be.
Yes.
And this is real academic excellence. Dr. Roach, bless his heart, used to talk. He'd say we were the best liberal arts college in the United States. I mean, he'd just make that claim, but it was hyperbolic in the extreme.
A lot like the Hillsdale Fair, the most popular fair on earth.
Yeah, exactly. That's the perfect analogy. But but now, I don't know. How would one know what the best liberal arts college was? But we're certainly,
a lot closer.
Yeah, and we're at a very, very high rung of the ladder.
This is entirely anecdotal, but the general sentiment that I've heard or I've sort of felt from new students, and maybe this is just a rose-tinted glasses kind of look, is an increase in a lack of personability, right, amongst upcoming students. Now, in your experience, would you say that those that are more like excel academically, right, lack a personal sort of touch when it comes to their interaction, say, with you as a professor or that kind of a thing? Or is that really not equivalent?
Well, there are all kinds of good students. And, we used to, back in the 80s, at least, even in the night, during the Roach era, I'll say, there was almost elevation to, a high pedestal. What we were really looking for was the good kid.
Yeah.
The good kid who was academically competent, maybe even excellent, but who also was a real human being, with a good personality and, good social skills.
Head on their shoulders.
Head on their shoulders. That, it was more to them than just bidding for A's every time they, took a course. I really can't speak, and I wouldn't feel right trying to confirm or refute
reasonable, understandable
the anecdotal perception that you just cited. But I think that's one of the risky things about, again, the ascent that we've made, that maybe we get students who, they're so bright and they have had such success, academic success in high school, that the adjustment here, if we hold to our standard, which I always figured that an A student in high school might remain an A student in college. And some of the best experiences I had teaching were of students who were better as college students than they were in high school.
Yeah.
But used to figure maybe a grade drop off, at least in the
first couple of
year.
semesters.
Yeah. So an A student in high school would probably be a B student in college, a B student in high school, a C student in college. And if you took a C student from high school, it was a crapshoot, as to whether they'd actually make it.
We're really betting on you on that one.
Yeah, but now it's practically all A students, top flight students. And if they get kicked in the teeth in their freshman year, maybe it means that, they're going to have a harder time accepting it and adjusting to it. But you'd have to if you could get Dean Pete or Dean Rebecca Dell to come in and talk to you about what they're seeing, and Brock Lutz even, they're the ones who really, I think, are in a position to pronounce with authority on that question. But it's a question worth asking or worth wondering about because, the whole complexion of the campus is rooted in what kind of kids we have here. Kids,
let me tell you, it feels that way now when I go on campus.
Well, imagine how I feel.
Goodness. All right, guys. Ostensibly, the show is about something. That's what people say.
Yeah.
I don't know how true that is. But we try to bring somebody on. We talk about their monomaniacal obsession, the thing they're really into right now, the thing they've been looking into. And we've got a teaser in regards to yours, which we usually don't get, right? We are over prepared in comparison to usual, which that doesn't mean
I tipped my hand.
Yeah. Not to say that there will be any smart analysis coming from anybody who's not at the center of this couch, but
well, or from me for that matter.
But why don't you introduce your topic? What would you like to talk about today?
Yeah.
Well, what I put back to you guys just a couple days ago, I think I said, why I'm a Gerald Ford Republican.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I have identified as a Republican since I was a kid because I grew up in a Republican household, especially on my dad's side. My mother was a little more suspect because I think her stepfather routinely voted Democrat back in the 1950s and 60s when I was growing up.
And what state was this again?
Pennsylvania. I grew up in the Philadelphia area, a small town about 30 miles. Where that escaped convict is running around now. Chester County, Pennsylvania. That's where I grew up.
Could be a relative. Who knows?
But anyhow.
Wait, escape convict is in Bam Margera? Is that who it is?
Well, that Brazilian guy who escaped from the Chester County Farms prison.
Okay, I didn't hear
and he's been on the loose for like 2 weeks. I mean, I keep texting my brother and sister-in-law who live back there now. They moved back a few years ago to the town my brother and I grew up in. And they're in a retirement community there. And I say, who's after this guy? The Keystone Cops, Laurel and Hardy, Barney Fife. I mean, why can't they catch him?
Yeah.
And somebody actually asked the lieutenant colonel from the Pennsylvania State Police I saw on Fox News earlier today, why can't you catch this guy? And he said, I don't like the assumption that's in that question. You're acting like we're not doing things right, or doing things the way they should be done. But it kind of
Well, I mean, there are two realities here. Either the cops are not doing their job, or this is a mastermind, and we should all fear this situation.
Well, he just came by a firearm.
Oh wow!
Within the last 36 hours or 48 hours.
Jeez, okay. So, they're on his tail enough to know that he's got a gun. But
well, that brings puts a whole new dimension on it. But anyhow, that's where I grew up, and back. The first presidential election I remember was 1960 when Richard Nixon ran against John F. Kennedy.
Yes.
And it was extremely, extremely close, obviously. I was 10 years old at the time. And it's really the first time I remember multiple adults crying in my living room because we all stayed up and watched the returns.
Yeah.
And
this Irish man's going to ruin our country.
Well, I consider myself of Irish descent.
Yeah,
but no, we were a Nixon household. My father was very proud of the fact that he voted for the first time in 1928 when Herbert Hoover defeated Al Smith, and then he said, "I didn't have another winner until 1952. That's 24 years later.
Yeah.
Because he never voted for Roosevelt.
Yeah.
And he never even voted for Harry Truman.
He didn't vote for Roosevelt even towards the end there?
No.
I feel like everybody voted for Roosevelt towards the end there.
Well, actually,
he was determined.
Actually, Roosevelt was losing appeal.
Yeah.
In the third and fourth elections. But anyhow, I remember being at a family picnic one time, and one of my dad's sisters admitted that she had voted for FDR against Alf Landon in 1936, and I thought they were going to string her up. But anyhow, I haven't. I have voted in. I actually had to count up. I voted in 13 presidential elections, and the last vote. This may shock if somebody's listening to this who actually knows me and knows. That I've taught at Hillsdale all these years.
Yeah.
It may surprise you to know that the last vote I ever cast with any real passion in a presidential was my vote for Gerald Ford in 1976.
Yeah.
And the last winner I had was George W. Bush in 2004. And I've only had when I had 2 winners with Bush, and my gosh, that's it.
Yeah, I was gonna say you and your father had a very similar record.
No, Nixon was the first. Gerald Ford in '76 was not the first vote.
Yeah.
I cast for president.
It's
Nixon,
one that you've cast with conviction, though.
Yeah,
as you said.
but Nixon in '72. Nixon was my hero.
Yeah,
but that all went sour.
Yeah, exactly.
But I still really wanted Ford to win, and one of the reasons why I never voted for Ronald Reagan was because I still to this day haven't forgiven him for beating up Ford in the Republican primary
in 76.
In 76.
Yeah.
Even though Ford won the nomination, Reagan was kind of a sore loser.
Yeah.
And didn't really campaign for Ford. Reagan kept saying that he was campaigning for the Republican platform. Well, the Republican platform was not a breathing human being, with a name on the ballot. So, but anyhow,
which is strange because in the next in '80, they asked Gerald Ford to be Reagan's VP.
Well, they thought about it.
Yeah.
But never actually. I don't know. I think they did. The Reagan people did make a serious approach.
Yes, they did.
Ford.
And from what I read, it sounded like Ford said that he would prefer if they had approached him with a co-presidency.
Yeah,
he basically wanted Kissinger. He said as long as Kissinger is the Secretary of State, and they didn't go for it.
Yeah, no, you've got that right, exactly right. And so Reagan picked Bush instead, and I didn't vote for Bush either time, Papa Bush either time. So
Papa Bush had a rough go of it.
Well, and then my big beef with both Reagan and Bush. Reagan, he had a special kind of compartment in my disdain
for his opposition to Jerry.
Right.
Yeah.
But I was a fiscal hawk back then. I've given up on that. I mean, $32 trillion later.
Yeah.
It's
a long time to be a fiscal hawk.
Why bother? But although I do feel for you guys because your generation is going to have to deal with.
I don't know. They've been saying that for a long time.
Well, I know, but it really is frightening. The profligacy that prevails right now.
Yeah.
Reagan harshly criticized Ford in the primary campaign in 1976 for running deficits of $50 to $60 billion.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when Reagan became president, he was running $100, $200, $300 billion.
Yeah, which is now a drop in the bucket.
Deficit. Yeah, but it's like that's what it was during the Reagan years that the whole position of the Republican Party, its historic embrace of fiscal responsibility, just didn't disappear completely.
Yeah, which is funny because that's not necessarily the narrative.
Oh no, it's not the narrative. I'm a contrarian.
Yeah.
On that.
well, and that's I think I would agree with you in a certain respect where, the free market focus of the Reagan administration wasn't as fiscally conservative as people like to think it was, because it was a lot of spending to make a lot happen.
Yeah. Well, Reagan said he was going to do three things, and he got elected on this in 1980 and again in 84. He was going to increase defense spending, lower taxes, and balance the budget. And he did the first two things, but never the third.
Yeah.
And the first two things were politically much easier
but
for
more
him.
expensive.
Well, exactly. I mean, how do you lower taxes, increase defense spending, and balance the budget?
Yeah.
Well, he hoped, and in all fairness to him, he hoped to make more cuts in other areas of the budget, but that's where he ran up against Democratic opposition. But there was a moment I actually voted for a Republican in 1980, but it was John Anderson, who was the third party candidate who went nowhere. But he'd come to Chapel Hill. He was the only candidate to visit Chapel Hill, and I got to hear him give a speech. It was actually indoors, and I was impressed with him. He won the student straw poll,
which we know how effective those are.
Right. But in 84, I was voting here, and I knew I wasn't going to vote for Reagan.
Yeah.
And I actually read every name on the ballot. I'd never voted on a voting machine before until I came to Michigan. The last time I voted in Pennsylvania, I put an X in a
box.
In pencil in a box, folded the ballot, dropped it in a larger box. But there was a moment in one of the debates between Reagan and Walter Mondale, where Walter Mondale, I think he was summing up, and he said, one of the big differences between me and Mr. Reagan, President Reagan, is that he's going to raise your taxes, but he's going to deny that he's going to do that.
Yeah.
He said, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to raise your taxes if you elect me president, and that's indeed what I will do.
Yeah.
And I said, this guy sounds like Honest John to me. So
too bad it had the opposite effect on the rest of America.
Well, yes.
The greatest electoral college victory in history over that.
You're right. Right. But
no, I mean, that's you had a lot of you stood your ground on that. That was backbone.
Yeah. But then and Reagan in 86, under the guise of tax reform and revenue enhancement, the euphemisms just flowed. He raised taxes.
Yeah.
And in 1988, then I didn't vote for Papa Bush because he said famously,
no new taxes.
No new tax. Read my lips. No new taxes. I said, you're not going to be able to keep that promise. And 2 years into his term, he did exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So when Ross Perot came along in 1992, third party candidate, I pulled the lever for him. So
speaking of Michigan specifically, so I was looking at Gerald Ford's congressional district today, District 5, which used to be based out of Grand Rapids. It was for a long time. It's moved around Michigan several times, but we're technically right now in District 5. So even though we're not the same locality that he would have represented, we are the same district number.
Spiritually.
Got it. Okay.
That is a kind of interesting thing.
It's only kind of interesting.
I want to kind of dig deeper into the way you phrased it when we first started this conversation was why I'm still a Gerald Ford Republican. Right?
Yeah.
To you, what does it mean to be a Gerald Ford Republican outside of just the physical aspect?
Yeah. Well, what I admired so much, and just about any biography that's written of Ford, and there was a great new biography just came out a few months ago, written by Richard Norton Smith, who is a very prolific writer. It's a big, thick book called An Ordinary Man or something like that.
Yeah.
And that was Jerry. I've been joking with people as, I mean, the campaign season for 2024 is just starting. We've had one debate, and I think the debates are just circuses. I mean, they don't really accomplish much, just give people a chance to tout themselves. But Jerry Ford was the only unelected president
Unelected VP and unelected president.
Exactly, and I like that. Let's hear it for unelected presidents. I say,
So when the military junta takes over, we know who's going to be the number one fan.
Well, I don't necessarily mean that.
Yeah.
But a couple things about that. I mean, one of the reasons I think our politics is sick today is because there's just so much ambition, and it's unhealthy ambition. The wrong people are running for the highest offices. I really believe that in both parties. People ask me, well, who did you like on the Republican stage? And I said, I really didn't like anybody. But and if Trump had been standing there, I wouldn't have liked him either. It'll be a sour day in November 24 if it really is another Trump-Biden race.
ticket,
I would probably vote for Trump just to keep Crooked Joe out of there. But I guess Trump can't use that moniker
anymore,
for him.
He'll be Crooked Trump.
But he's worn that out with Crooked Hillary.
Exactly.
He's got to keep coming up with original
material
handles for these people.
Yeah.
But for being an unelected president, and Ford, made no bones about this. He never had ambitions to be president. He wanted to be Speaker of the House. That was the height of his ambition.
Yeah, and he only ever got to minority leader?
Yeah, exactly, because when he was the Republican leader in the House, they never had a majority. So, but and there were some. He, I think if President Ford were sitting right here with us, he would avow that he and Richard Nixon had always been good friends.
Yes,
they came in the after. They were both Navy veterans in the Second World War. They came in. Nixon beat Ford to Washington by 2 years, but they and Nixon made a point of introducing himself to Ford and welcoming him to the House. Blah blah blah, and they'd always stayed close, even though Nixon betrayed Ford as he betrayed the whole country with his lies in the closing years of Nixon's presidency. I think they still remained friends. But I really like that about Ford, and the most frequent adjective assigned to him by full-length biographers or just by people who remember him is decent.
Yeah.
And I think, frankly, the adjective that I'm tempted to apply to our politics right now is indecent.
Yes.
Well, that's why, and I mean, I still consider myself a Republican, and I know that there probably aren't 10 people in the country who would, identify, call themselves Jerry Ford Republicans. But I wish that there were more people aspiring to high office whose foundational quality was just fundamental decency.
That's an interesting, position to take, in that, Gerald Ford himself sort of felt like the Republican Party left him behind, at the end of the 20th century, sort of by the time he was out of the White House. And, to think that a lot has changed since then. I mean, nowadays people are saying that there's people who ascended into politics during the Reagan era, the Bush era, or whatever, who say, the Republican Party has left me behind. So that's 3 steps of the Republican Party leaving someone behind. To focus on Ford.
It really, Mark Levin really ticked me off. A few months ago. I don't watch his show because I don't like him.
Yeah.
I would probably agree with a good bit of what he said. I just don't like him. I don't like personalities who never smile. I mean, it's like, it's like this angry face is looking at you whenever he speaks. But I just was channel jumping one night, and I caught, and he was knocking Ford, said, well, we need people in the Republican Party and carrying the standard of the Republican Party who stand for something, not like Jerry Ford, who didn't stand for anything.
Yeah.
And I don't know I don't know what Ford ever did to him. I mean, I know Levin was a Reagan man from, his teenage years, but that was just an outright slander to say that about Ford. But you're right. I think he's largely forgotten. Trump did pay homage. He visited Ford's tomb up in Grand Rapids in 2016, or maybe shortly after he was elected, which I thought was one of the few noble gestures that I can ever recall Trump making. But then, Trump interfered in the election in 2022. He was so determined to get Peter Meyer out of office because Peter Meyer, the first-term congressman from Grand Rapids, the son of the,
Meyer family,
the owner of the Meyer stores, because Peter had voted to impeach Trump the second time around. So Trump endorsed another candidate who beat Peter Meyer in the primary, and then the Republicans lost the seat.
Yeah.
And that was Jerry Ford's old seat, at least in geographical terms. Yes. Well, that
not my weird math. Yeah.
Right. But Grand Rapids really has gone left. I dare say they've gone woke. I mean, even the great Calvin, and I don't know, I shouldn't even speak about it, but I know Calvin has kind of fallen on hard times. I think they've probably gone pretty seriously woke. They booed George Bush when he gave the commencement address up there in 2004. So
that was a while ago.
Anyhow, yeah. So
it's a tough one. All right, cool. Yeah, and would you say that having distance from Ford allows somebody like Mark Levin to just sort of throw out a phrase like he had no backbone and he didn't stand for anything?
Well, that's the claim that the Reaganites made in the 76 election.
Yeah.
And I don't know how old Mark Levin is, but he might not have even been a teenager by then. But by the time Reagan left office 12 years later, I think Levin was becoming politically aware and starting to mature. But that was the claim that the Reaganites made about him. This is when, forgive the crudeness here, but, Republicans especially started, like dogs, started sniffing each other's license plates. And if they didn't get enough conservative stench, then, they would write the person off. I mean, this is still going on. Mm-hmm. The Trumpers' favorite charge against people who, when they sniff their license plate, they don't get enough Trump smell. Mm-hmm. What do they call them? Rhinos, mm-hmm. Republicans in name only.
Yeah.
Well, it was Ronald Reagan himself who issued the 11th commandment that you should never speak ill of another Republican. Trump has basically just trashed that idea, multiple times over. And that's one of the reasons why Ford and Reagan never really reconciled, as best I can tell.
Well, he reconciled with Carter. He reconciled with, he reconciled too with Nixon, right?
Yeah, I think he and Nixon stayed friends. They'd always been friends. Mm-hmm. But Ford knew that Reagan damaged him in 76. And it was with charges, basically, that Ford was a false conservative.
I have a quick question. I was thinking about this a lot today, actually, knowing that we were going to talk about this. Do you think that the impact of the Ford pardon of Nixon has been outsized in the histories of the event? Because it seems like a lot of people claim that the reason he didn't win his, election, not his re-election, his election was everybody boils it down to that. They boil it down to the Nixon pardon. How much of an impact do you think that actually had?
I think Ford was in the process of overcoming the damage from that.
Yeah.
That came in September 1974, and the election that Ford lost to Carter, following on the heels of the primary in which he'd beaten Reagan, was in November 76. So, almost 900 days had passed since then. So he was overcoming that. But I think the real reason Ford lost the election was because Reagan didn't campaign for him.
Yeah.
It was so close. Ford had 240 electoral votes. It was 297 to 240. That was the closest vote in the Electoral College since 1916. Now, when Wilson narrowly defeated Charles Evans Hughes for a second term, but there have been a lot of closer elections than that in the Electoral College since then. Yeah. But if Ford lost Mississippi, Missouri, and a couple of other states, that if he'd gotten all four, and they were Mississippi, he lost.
Yeah.
Now Carter was a Southerner, and the Southerners allowed themselves to get excited about that.
Yeah, well, and then the South was sort of more politically kind of swinging at that point.
It was just beginning, to swing. And Reagan, of course, the old expression used to be, cracked the solid South. Could a republic? Eisenhower cracked the solid South.
Yeah,
in a few instances.
It pays to be, a famous war hero.
Well, yeah, but Mississippi went for Carter, but. Reagan was the darling down there, at least among Republicans. If he had gone not even all out, if he just appeared with Ford a few times on the trail, for example, that could have swayed enough votes in 3 or 4 states to have tipped the election, and that would have killed any more speculation about the effect of the pardon.
Yeah,
the thing that I like best about people's judgment of the pardon today, that wasn't necessarily the case when Ford did it, is that it was the right thing to do.
I feel it's almost universal now.
Yeah, but that's what governed Ford's judgment.
Yeah,
he was thinking of the country, the good of the country first. And could Donald Trump possibly be thinking about the good of the country, or Joe Biden, 2 old men?
Yeah,
one facing 91 felony counts, the other probably one of the biggest crooks we've ever had. But if that's the choice that the American voters have in 2024, how is that good for the country? Why don't they just stand down? Why don't they just retire? I did it, and I'm happy I did.
For the good of the college.
Well,
they haven't even...
And the next generation, the rising generation.
They have even nicer houses, too, to go home to. They didn't have to redo their kitchen.
True.
They got Martha's Vineyard and, Mar-a-Lago. They're just fine.
Oh, how are we doing on time, by the way? Just that I... Oh, okay. Let's move on then.
We're wrapping up then.
We got it. Yeah, wow. Unfortunately, we move on.
If you want, we do an extra half hour after the show. If you want to stick around,
you don't have to.
You don't have to.
You don't have to answer right now on air.
You don't have to answer right now. You don't have to be pressured.
All right. Okay. So I want to thank first and foremost our patrons for supporting the show. We could not do this without you. First, our top patrons: Joe Papalardo, Sammy Roberts, Zach and Amber Strehle, and Luke Robson. Thank you so much. We could again,
a couple of those notes.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yes, we could not do the show without y'all. So one of the things that we do is as mentioned, the post show. Pay for the Patreon, you guys get the post show, over 60 hours of content for $5. That's pretty crazy. But in addition, you guys can ask questions that we will answer on the podcast with the guest. So let's get a rolling. We've got quite a few. So first off, we've got some from Samuel Roberts.
Oh, okay. Surprise.
All right. So I do not know the context here. So I do not know how.
If you want to veto a question, you have full authority.
All right.
Which is from Samuel Roberts.
Maybe I should veto it before even hearing it.
Did you actually enter the Capitol building on January 6th? Or did you just sit on the front steps?
Sammy might remember this, but he and I were on the phone in an extended conversation in the midst of all that.
Yeah.
Because we were both sharing our shock at what we were seeing, the spectacle that we were seeing. And I assume that he would have noticed because of the background noise if I had been in that mob as opposed to the quiet of my living room when I was talking.
Is that the sound of a tear gas canister?
See, I don't know what the deal with the slander, Sammy, that you would imply such things.
I feel like this is going to intone a certain direction for these questions.
No. We've got one from Brant Cohen.
Oh,
one
good.
From Brant Cohen, which is, how much would they have to pay you? who knows who they are?
Yeah.
To have your mustache shaven off.
No sum of money.
No sum of money
would do that.
You're retired.
We're partners for life.
Yeah.
So
You're retired. You're comfortable. What could you do with $2 million?
And when did you make the decision for the mustache? When did that happen in your lifetime?
January 1st, 1970.
Wow, impressive.
You've been in it for a long time.
Yeah, well, it was kind of a New Year's one of the few New Year's resolutions that I've actually kept.
Yeah.
You've gone through several cycles of it being cool and then not cool and then cool again.
True.
So yeah,
True.
Here you are on the other side.
I also had mutton chop sideburns.
Wow.
Those are my college days.
Yes.
Back that far.
I I also did in college. So we all change.
Guys in the 70s really look weird.
Yes.
I mean, it was real. The 70s were a kooky. Well, the 60s were crazy. The 70s were just kind of dull crazy.
Yeah. You chose the right time to grow a mustache. They were kind of in at that point.
Well, gave me something to do, a little relic to cling to.
There you go. All right, we got one from Jimmy McGrath. All right.
Oh my!
Yeah.
My past is coming back to haunt me.
This is Ghost of Christmas Past, actually, this entire time.
Which is, what person, historical or personal, has the greatest impact on your formation as a man?
I guess you can't say Gerald Ford.
You can't say Gerald Ford.
No, never had the pleasure of actually meeting the great man, but well, who was the poet who said I'm the product of everyone I've met? I mean, I've been very blessed starting with my own father, but to have been mentored, whether they even were conscious of the fact that they were mentoring me, but a series of adults who made indelible impressions on me, whether it was on the question of moral values, spiritual discipline, spiritual aspirations. When I got to graduate school, I feel like Will Rogers. He said, "I never met a man I didn't like." That's not true of me, but I have never had a bad teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very well taught, very well nurtured in the home by two wonderful parents, aunts and uncles, church friends, family friends. And once I got into school, teachers that, for starters, observing them and interacting with them and learning from them made me want to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But all the way up into graduate school, I was really fortunate to have had the program director at North Carolina that I had. Sam Williamson's his name. He's still living. He's 88, will be 88 years old his next birthday. I saw him in Chapel Hill last June, hoping to see him again next month at the inauguration of new president at the University of the South.
Mm-hmm.
But the Germans have an expression for professors who direct doctoral program, Dr. Vater. It's like literally your doctor father.
Yeah.
And when my biological father died suddenly, I was in Paris. It was in 1980 and died on my 30th birthday as it happened. So I flew home immediately. So I was getting out of the car in Pennsylvania out front of our childhood home, walking up the stairs to the front porch. The phone was ringing inside, and it was the aforementioned Sam Williamson calling me up. So that closeness, that love, and the wisdom that I have really gained or gleaned from a number of adult relationships, I would say it's had the greatest impact on my life. But it's been a it's the old saying, well, God's not finished with me yet. You're developing constantly. And I mean, you guys, the students that I've had here at Hillsdale have had a wonderfully positive impression, sometimes negative impression. I don't want to. I'm glad I'm not like that guy, but that sounds like.
Are you just pointing at Josh over there?
No. That sounds too much like the old parable of the Pharisee and the publican. Thank God I'm not like other people. That's not my point. But there are such things as negative role models that I think we can all point to in our lives. So I've probably had my share of them. Donald Trump comes to
mind. Goodness. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yes,
this
has been great to have you.
A pleasure. Again, if you guys are interested, Patreon /Monomaniacs pod. And if you guys can't support us financially, that's okay. That's just life. Like and subscribe on the YouTube. That's free and it's helpful.
Yes.
And again, thank you for the time. And hopefully we'll talk to you again someday or soon.
Great. Thanks. It really has been a pleasure.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on. Glad this moment finally came.
Yes. It's all cool. All right. Goodbye, everyone.